Hello, I suppose I should say to begin with, welcome back. If you were a regular observer of the Time on the Terrain series that I started running last year, then essentially, sorry, I kind of dropped the ball a little bit on that, but I'm going to aim to get this back into the groove on a weekly regimen. And what I want to talk about today, I think, is really a provocation that is almost a thread that I realize I've now been looking at for at least the last maybe 6 months. And it's just sort of jarred me into saying, okay, this is something significant that is very prevalent in the terrain that we're interacting with and that we're seeing really regardless of marketplace or organizational scope. And that is that a lot of organizations seem to be investing significantly more in strategy than culture. Now, you might immediately say, yeah, duh, that's the way it's always done. Organizations will always be biased towards investing in strategy because it's construct, there's a real structure that defines all the necessary stuff: goals, roles, processes, systems, etc., etc. And that is, of course, entirely true. The problem is that strategy won't get you very far if you don't have an effective culture as a minimum. But if you don't have a nurturing culture, and really what you want to aim for is a thriving culture, then the strategy is going to give you a diminishing rate of return. And essentially, a lot of your strategy is going to be left on the table if the people that are essentially the custodians of your culture don't really feel that they know what the strategy is, that they know how their role impacts on the execution of it, and that they don't feel inspired and essentially intrinsically motivated to go out and deliver that strategy. So this provocation really came very starkly in a masterclass conversation that I hosted with my colleague Melina Litkowitz last week. And it also resonated with a conversation that I'd had the previous week. So in particular, in the masterclass conversation, which is a curated conversation, there was a person there who's a partner in a legal practice. And the conversation I'd had the week before was with a partner of one of the top 4 consulting firms. And both of these two conversations, so the segment in curated conversations and the one-on-one conversation with this partner of a top 4 firm, they both resonated with the same thing, that what they are seeing inside their own organizations and out in the marketplace with their clients is a lot of strategy work. This almost constant need to go back to the strategic drawing board and rewrite everything because COVID's disrupted all kinds of market forces. It's led to lots of shifts and lots of changes, and the strategy that you had maybe even 3 months ago now is almost entirely different. The challenge is, though, that both of these very experienced, very intelligent people were recognizing that the strategies just weren't delivering the outcomes that was expected, let alone were desired, because the culture work wasn't being done. And in particular, in the conversation, the one-on-one conversation with a Big 4 firm partner, I think what was clear there was that it was the sophistication with which culture is typically viewed, that it really needs a lot of work and really complicated work in order to make any significant difference. And to an extent, not only do I actually think that that is true, that is what people's perspective is, I would put my hand up and say I've been a propagator of that view. Right, that culture work's difficult, and culture work takes real time and needs experts like the firm that I run in order to really engage with it and do it really well. And all of that is also true, but it does not have to be that way. Culture, when you boil it right down, is actually really quite simple. It's the relationships that exist within a group. That is what culture is. That's how culture is experienced. It's not words on a wall. It's not the results of a survey. It's the way that people interact with each other within a group context on a daily basis. That is what culture is. And you can influence that and interact with that and impact on that very directly through doing a lot of the things that we talk about. Through taking a coaching approach, by asking better questions, by holding curiosity before you jump to advice, as Michael Bungay-Stanier would say, and also really focusing on the well-being of the people within that group, in particular, the safety of the people within that group, and especially the psychological safety of the people within that group, right? And that's one of the challenges, I think, of over-investing in strategy and missing out on investing in culture. Because every time you change a strategy, there is a compounding chain of consequence that goes down and down and down the line. And the further the line goes away from the people who are responsible for changing the strategy, often the communication gets stretched. And the thinner the link becomes between what am I doing on a daily basis and where is this organization going. And that strains the relationships between people in a group, and that negatively impacts on culture. So if you're constantly tinkering with your strategy and you're not, as a minimum, balancing the investment on the culture in terms of communication and looking after your people and involving and including them with how the strategy is going to be executed, and ideally involving them in how it's formulated, you're going to end up with this vicious, depreciating return cycle where you keep changing the strategy and you don't get the returns you want. And you keep changing the strategy and you don't get the returns you want because the culture is what incubates how the strategy actually comes into existence. That, I think, really is, of course, being me, an overly wordy distillation, but I think this is exactly what I've been trying to tease out in these conversations, in these observant episodes over the last at least 6 months. There's been too much emphasis on changing strategy and not enough investment in changing and rebuilding and really facilitating the nurturing of this really powerfully conductive culture that actually pushes the execution of your strategy forward. So what would I suggest you do about this? Well, of course, I was going to suggest that you call me and I can talk to you about how we do it. And if you can't get hold of me, then talk to anyone in my team. But in all seriousness, right, the cultural work that needs to be done right now doesn't have to be complicated. Doesn't have to be 18 months and hundreds of thousands of dollars of fees spent with consultants. It needs to be really empathetic conversation, curious dialogue between those that lead and those that are in the group, and involving everybody in that group in what's happening and how you can all impact and make it better together. If you can do that, that's the beginning. And then maybe partner up with a coach. Partner up with someone who is a really, really good team facilitator to hold the space with that group so that the relationships can be explored and expanded with an external party, right? That right now, I would say, is enough. Yes, there's skills. Yes, there's capabilities. Yes, there's a lot more that you can do, but just start with those two things. Have more empathetic, curious dialogue. Partner up with a coach or a facilitator to just deepen the relationships within the group. If you can do that, frankly, right now, I think you'll be doing more than most. And then from there, you can go build, do more to try and balance strategy and culture. And if you can do that, your strategy all of a sudden will start to work. The execution will start to happen. Because this is the point where I think a lot of people are at right now, all over the globe. Like, the ideas are starting to run dry. You can only change your strategy so many times over the course of 12 months. You need to invest in your culture. And if you would like, then give me a call or drop me a note, or even just drop a comment in here. And I'd love to talk to you about it. So that's time on the train for today. Maybe a little bit different to some of the things that have come before, but I'm going to put my hand up now and pledge to you that I will be back here live again next week to see what's changed and what's occurred between now and then. So if you're watching this now or you're watching this at any time, thank you for your time and attention. And I look forward to maybe hearing from you and just hearing how you're going with your balance of investment, of strategy and culture. See you soon.